She let the priest, the man, tow her along. He seemed to know the way, although he was a stranger to the district, and if he had walked the allotments in the daylight, it could not have been more than a half a dozen times. He turned without faltering onto the convent path. He must eat a lot of carrots, she thought. Can see in the dark. The stile, Fludd said, just ahead of us now. Can you manage? They reached it. He mounted first. Philomena was half over, putting out her long leg in its thick, fuzzy stocking. A shape materialized from, it seemed, the ditch. Good evening, Fludd said. Mr. McAvoy, isn't it? She imagined, though she could not see, that the parishioner gave him a look as if to say, yes, young fellows, you will learn who I am. Excuse me. Yes, young fellow, you will learn who I am. But when McAvoy approached and took out a pocket torch and shone it, his face wore its normal expression, amiable but knowing. Taking my constitutional, he explained. In the dark? It is my habit, said McAvoy. I seem, Father, better equipped than you and Sister Philomena, although by venturing the observation I mean no breath of criticism. Would you care to borrow my pocket torch? Father Fludd can see in the dark, she said. Handy, said McAvoy. His tone was sardonic. His torch beam traveled downwards. It came to rest on her leg and slithered over it, as if her stocking had fallen down. Come, sister, Fludd said. Don't stick there. Hop over. He held out his hand, but the tobacconist was there before him, courtly but insistent. I should never like to see a sister struggle, McAvoy said. You will find me always at your service, a strong arm and a willing heart. He seemed to know it was effusive, uncalled for, backed away under Fludd's sharp look, and then touched his cap. His exit was as sudden as his entrance, sucked away into the murk. She shuddered. Father Anglin says he is the devil. Fludd was surprised. McAvoy? Why, but he's a harmless man. She felt the distance between them increase, a shaft of cold as he moved from her side. Has Father Anglin never spoken to you of meeting him one afternoon? Yes, he has spoken of something of that kind, but he did not say the man's name. I don't know why he thinks it. I saw the devil myself when I was 7. He was nothing like McAvoy. 7, Fludd said, the age of reason. What was he like? A beast, a great rough thing, breathing outside my bedroom door. You were a brave girl to open it. Oh, I knew I must. I had to see what was there. Did he come another night? He had no need. No, once is enough. But now, she said, if Father Anglin is right, the devil has come much closer. Indeed, he has taken your arm. He has proffered his assistance any time, he seemed to say. At your service. Does that alarm you? The way he rose up just now, out of nowhere, it seemed to be... I can do that myself, Fludd said indifferently. I have my exits and my entrances. It is cheap, a conjurer's trick. How do I know that it is not you who is the devil? She came to a halt. They could see the convent below them, and a light burning in an upstairs room. Her voice came out stubborn, hostile. A man who pretends to be a priest, hears confession, gets people's confidence. And she thought, what if the white flame I felt in my chest was the first flame of that gnawing hellfire, the fire that renews as it consumes, so that torture is always fresh? What if the unaccountable heat that wrapped me in the shed were from the first blast of Satan's bellows? You must choose, Fludd said, his tone practical. I cannot tell you what to think. If you think I am bad for you, I will not try to talk. If you think I am bad for you, I will not try to talk you out of it. Bad for me? She was aghast at his choice of word. Man or devil, she thought. Devil or devil's pawn, you'll only damn my immortal soul. That's all you'll do. But if I were a devil, Fludd said, I would have a relish for you. It is strange that, though you would think the devil a man of fiery tastes, there is nothing he likes better at his banquet than the milquetoast soul of a tender little nun. If I were the devil, you would not be clever enough to find me out. Not until I had dined on you and dined well. A long-drawn wail came from Sister Philomena. A long-drawn wail came from Sister Philomena. A wail of shock and distress. Then she began to cry. She put her fist in her mouth and cried around it, her mouth working around the knuckle, bleats escaping from around the bone. In the convent parlor, Mother Perpetua waited for her, sitting upright by the dead fire, smiling in the dark. Seven. Perpet thumped her, going about like a hoyden, she said, traipsing through the fields, out in the night like a tinker. She knew it was the fields and not the roads because of the burrs and dead leaves that clung to the girl's habit, and because of the mud on her shoes. She did not know the girl had been with Father Fludd. If she did, If she did, I would get worse, Philly thought. She's jealous of me, wants him to pay her some attention. No nun, she. Ought to be ashamed, goes after men. Priests, tried it with Angwin, chased her out of the presbytery. Sister Anthony said so, never forgiven him. So she kept her own counsel while Perpet ranted and thumped. This is a sick province, she thought. They're hopeless people. It's a place full of devils. It needs a mission sending to it. It wrestles not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. St. Paul would have sorted it out. Make my convent a laughingstock, Perpetua said. Thud, thud with her bony knuckles. Philomena reached out and grabbed Perpetua's arm just above the wrist. She held it in her farm girl's grip. She said nothing, but in her eyes those yellow lights flashed like chips of gold. That night, tossing on her hard bed, she couldn't sleep or lie awake. Wakefulness seemed the lesser evil. She tried to rouse herself, but marauding nightmares circled her brain like the outriders of a guerrilla band. Negredo, a huge blackamoor, offered her a cigarette from a silver case. Albedo, an angel, lit it for her. They wrestled on the allotments, rolling over and over on the rough ground. Later, they linked arms and sang Danny Boy. At 5 o'clock, she heard the rising bell and turned over, ramming her face into the pillow. She thought it was a special penitential pillow that Mother Perpetua had decreed for her. It seemed filled with small stones. Sister Anthony was the caller for the week, and she could hear her progress along the corridor, rapping at each door and calling Dominus Vobiscum. Philomena yawned and pushed herself upright in the bed. She fumbled at her throat. The strings of her nightcap were thin and waxy from her sweat. She dug her fingernails into the knot, trying to loosen them, but she hardly had any fingernails. Dominus Vobiscum fluted outside her door. And Sister Anthony tapped and tapped again. Dominus Vobiscum, what are you doing in there, sister? She felt she could not trust her voice. She tilted up her chin, still picking at the knots. If I had scissors, she thought, scissors of my own, that would be against my vow of holy poverty. If I had a looking glass, that would be against my vow of holy chastity. Goodness gracious me, girl, Sister Anthony sounded cantankerous now. Dominus Vobiscum, are you deaf? The knots unraveled, the cap came off. She dropped it on the coarse blanket, put her bare feet on the linoleum floor, stretched. Under her shift, her upper arms, shoulders were covered in small blue bruises. Dominus Vobiscum, are you ill? Sick at heart, she thought. Et cum spiritu tuo, she intoned. Her voice sounded normal, traitor voice. But her throat ached with tears and her chest felt clogged with unholy expectation. I should think so too, Sister Anthony said and passed on. Later, after an hour on her knees in the chapel, she went into the kitchen and helped Sister Anthony fill the jugs with weak tea for breakfast. I think Father Fludd has the gift of prophecy, she remarked. Is that the case now? The old nun inquired civilly. I wonder, will he prophesy something for Aintree races? Prophecy doesn't mean telling the future. It means speaking out about the true nature of things. Sister Anthony could see that little Philomena had been crying. Dimly, she remembered her own early days in the convent, the ritual humiliation and the lonely nights. Since it was she who was in charge of ladling out the breakfast, she had it within her means to be kind to the girl. She gave her extra porridge. Morning, Judd McAvoy, smiling to himself and whistling between his teeth, dusted his shelves and opened up his shop, drawing the bolts on the front door and turning round the cardboard sign that hung in the window. Agnes Dempsey washed up the breakfast dishes. Father Fludd put on his vestments for Mass, praying for each one the correct prayer. Philly could see him in her mind's eye. Amice, alb, cincture, maniple, stole, chasuble. Make me white, O Lord, and cleanse my heart. That morning he had to take a class for a PE lesson. That morning he had to take a class for a PE lesson. Not her communion class. Did I say she or he? That morning she had to take a class for a PE lesson. Not her communion class. These children were older. The gloss had gone off them. First there was dressing them in the fug of the classroom. Outside it was sharp and cold. And until 10 o'clock, sparse crystals of frost shone on the ruts of the carriage drive. The girls, between their desks, had to squirm into thick navy blue knickers and out of their frocks and their layers of cardigans. The boys had to take their exercise as best they might in their knee-length gray flannel shorts. There were black pumps to be given out from the metal cage in the corner of the classroom, where they were kept between use. Common to the whole class, assorted sizes in different conditions, but mostly poor. Most of the children did not know their shoe size, and if they did, they had no way of securing it. There was no method of distribution, merely a free-for-all, and this was the way it had always been. They were enjoined to keep silence during the proceeding. Philomena stood over them, hefty seeming this morning, her eyes blazing, making sure not a mutter or groan escaped. But the silence of the exercise rendered it no less violent. Arms flailed, pinches were delivered, until in some fashion everyone was shod. Then the procession. Some walked wincingly, their toes mashed together. Others, who had made the contrary error, flapped like water birds. In addition, it was mysterious. There were more left pumps than there were right, and Sister Philomena noticed that it was the poorest, the meekest, the most stupid, who were further disadvantaged by this and had to edge along with their 2 feet swerving the same way. The Nissen hut served as a dining room besides a gymnasium, and smelt of dumplings and fat. The trestle tables and wooden benches were stacked around the room, and on the floor the children set up their equipment. This is what Mother Perpetua called it, the equipment. Quote, "The education committee is sending us equipment," end of quote. Until this year, there had only been small oval mats, one per child. They would set them out and roll about on them. Once they began, they were no trouble. Then they would stand by the mats and practice jumping on the spot. It was an exercise suitable for all age groups. Most of them could manage it, and it did not strain their taut nerves. But the equipment had added a new terror to their lives. It was shiny and hard with sharp edges. Just setting it up and fitting it together was a problem for an engineer. The half-clad children sweated beneath its weight as if they were building bridges for the Japanese. There were steps and slides. There was a great ladder on supports that they were meant to swing on and, she supposed, hoist themselves up and pop their heads between the rungs. And most awful of all, there was a thick, round wooden pole. It rested on metal stands parallel to the ground and at the height of her chest. "Form teams," she said despairingly. You. None of them wanted to go on the pole. They did not know what to do with it, what to make of it at all. Some, when it came to their turn, crouched beneath and threw their arms around it and kicked off with their feet, trying to raise themselves and wrap their ankles over its top. It became the vogue, she noticed. Each child would attempt it. Some with more feebleness than others, few with any lasting success. In the face of the equipment, their timidity became clear and the extent of their clumsiness, weakness, poor eyesight. They were embarrassed, for it was an emotion that they could feel. They knew that the equipment had hidden uses which they could not discern. They knew that other children somewhere else in happier circumstances might unlock its secrets. The equipment was a message that the education committee had sent them to prepare them for the humiliations of their future. I'm going to reread that. Seems to be the verdict on phys ed class from Hilary Mantel. Some, when it came their turn, crouched beneath and threw their arms around it and kicked off with their feet, trying to raise themselves and wrap their ankles over its top. It became the vogue, she noticed. Each child would attempt it, some with more feebleness than others, few with any lasting success. In the face of the equipment, their timidity became clear, and the extent of their clumsiness, weakness, poor eyesight. They were embarrassed, for it was an emotion that they could feel. They knew that the equipment had hidden uses which they could not discern. They knew that other children somewhere else in happier circumstances might unlock its secrets. The equipment was a message that the education committee had sent them to prepare them for the humiliations of their future. Mass would be long over now, Sister Philomena thought. She stood in a shadow at the side of the hut, letting the children do as they pleased, for she knew that none of the other nuns would come by. Presently they grew tired of their efforts and fell timidly out of line, eyeing her out of the corners of their eyes, and got out their familiar oval mats. They bent over, put their skinny gray arms on the floor, and began to do a thing they called bunny jumps. The two children from Netherhofton withdrew into a darker corner and began to hypnotize each other. He could come and find me, she thought. If he were to inquire at the school, they would tell him I was there. But no, he would not do that. He would not inquire. But he could make some excuse, something that he wanted me to do for him. What could that be? Now that I am not sacristan, he cannot say. I need polishing doing, sister. I need extra polishing. I need a very special shine. Putting on the candlesticks. What could he want then? But he hardly needs a priest's reasons for what he wants to do because he is not a priest. Did I know it all along or just suspect it? Did he make a slip or did I just feel it in my bones? He is just an ordinary man. But no, she thought, correcting herself, not that. Not in any sense an ordinary man. What had struck her forcibly on waking that morning now occurred to her again, that she had no clear picture of his features in her mind. At Mass, it was true she had been forced to study him mostly from the back, but had she not been alone with him at the allotments for an hour or more? Perhaps she thought, I have looked so intensely that I have been unable to see. I have looked at him as he seems to look at me, with eyes that see beyond the skin. She had heard it said that you could, quote, devour, end of quote, someone with your eyes. It was an expression that people used. Yes, that was what she had done. Her eyes had eaten him all up and rendered his features pulp. Now, like a greedy, heedless child, she had left nothing over for the hour of hunger, the hour of dearth. I'm going to reread that. Perhaps she thought, I have looked so intensely that I have been unable to see. I have looked at him as he seems to look at me, with eyes that see beyond the skin. She had heard it said that you could devour someone with your eyes. It was an expression that people used. Yes, that was what she had done. Her eyes had eaten him all up and rendered his features pulp. Now, like a greedy, heedless child, she had left nothing over for the hour of hunger, the hour of dearth. When the end of the lesson came, Philomena lined the children up and trailed them along the carriage drive. The sun had struggled out and filtered thinly between the bare branches. Look, Robin Redbreast, she pointed to the ditch, where the bird with its mouse-brown back darted in crisp leaves. Yes, sister, they said dutifully. They looked where she pointed, but they did not see. They did not know what they were looking for. Sparrows, they knew. Pigeons. In procession, they rounded the curve of the carriage drive, and there was Father Fludd, stepping towards them in animated conversation with Agnes Dempsey. Sister Philomena made the children stand aside respectfully while the priest passed. They began more or less as he drew level, a drawling, yodeling chant. Quote, Good morning, Father. Good morning, Miss Dempsey. It was the way the children always spoke when they spoke together. They learnt it at 5 years old in the nursery class, learnt it in their first hour at school. Sometimes Philomena thought that if she ever heard it again, she would give way to screaming. She would sit on the floor and rend her garments and put ashes on her head in reparation for the foolishness of the world. Christ died to free us from the burden of our sin, but he never, so far as she could see, lifted a finger to free us from our stupidity. And as her thoughts ran on, her heart beat faster. She thought it was climbing into her throat, battering there and twisting inside out, contorting in that small space. Nobody would see it underneath her habit. But suppose she were some ordinary woman in a costume and blouse. People would nudge each other. That poor woman's heart is fighting its way out. It shocked and amazed her that the thought should occur that she should think of herself as a woman, when she was in fact a nun. She felt her face grow red and her hands begin to tremble. Good morning, children, Fludd said cheerfully. Agnes Dempsey gave them a thin, tight smile. Fludd's eyes flickered over her. He inclined his head, somber, walked on, his conversation with Miss Dempsey proceeding in lower tones, a more subdued manner. Agnes Dempsey walked more slowly. She took a long look over her shoulder at the young nun, who had turned aside now and dropped her face, and whose right hand had gone to the wooden crucifix hanging at her chest. She had not turned aside fast enough to hide her expression from Miss Dempsey. that compound of fear, yearning, and excitement that had yet to be broken down into its elements and recombined by another's will. Agnes, in agitation and sadness, touched her wart. I have missed all my chances in life, she thought. Even a nun has not missed more chances than me. Virgins may see unicorns. Spinsters never do. This time, when Philomena approached the confessional, she knew it would be Angwin. She knelt in the fragrance of polish and tobacco, began at once rattling her words off. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It is no time at all since my last confession. I have a question for you. A German friend of mine who knows only a few words of English. Oh, hello there, my dear, the priest said. Was anxious to go to confession, but unfortunately none of the priests in the neighborhood knew any German. Was my friend obliged to make his confession through an interpreter? Father Angwin said. He thought. It was not a problem he had encountered directly, though he had often found the feather Hoftonian speech thick and incomprehensible when he had first arrived in the parish. Well now, he said at last, do you know what I think he should do? I think he should get one of those dictionaries, a German-English dictionary, and discover what are the names of his sins in English. And as for the number of times he has done each sin, well, he may very quickly learn to count in English, I suppose. Then he might pass a note to the priest in the confessional. Though, he added, it might be as well if the priest were warned as to what were to occur. I should not like to come to hear confessions one day and find a foreigner poking a paper at me through the grill. So that would be better than an interpreter, would it, Father? I am not ruling out an interpreter, mind. If the need were desperate, communication is difficult at the best of times, don't you find? He paused. No one should walk around in a state of sin for a moment more than necessary. Perhaps especially not if the person is in a place strange to them. If a person is traveling, you know, there's always a danger of accidents. And if you did use an interpreter, he would be bound by the seal of the confessional, of course. Naturally. There was another short pause. Angwin said, Have you anything to tell me today? Anything about yourself, I mean? No, Father. You are wrestling with your problem still, your temptation to sin, or has the temptation passed? No, if anything, he cut in. I have been praying for you. He heard her breathing beyond the grill and the curtain, the hiccups in her breathing's rhythm, as if she might cry. Any more questions today? Oh yes, many. She reads them off a paper, he thought. A doctor has human bones in his possession from the days of his studies. He is anxious to get rid of them. He got them while he was a student in a Protestant country. Germany again? She stopped. His question had thrown her. He was not meant to interrupt. Do go on. Where is he supposed to bury them? Protestant bones, Father said. I hardly know. In Ireland, she said timidly. There are special plots in the major hospitals for burying the bits of bodies that are taken away in operations. There may be a similar dispensation here. If they might be useful to some hospital, he could donate them. She has answers on her paper, he thought, as well as questions. I don't see why not. But he must be reverent with them, must he not? They were part of a living body once. He must recollect. And that body was the temple of the Spirit, even though it was a Protestant, probably. Again, Father Angwin said, if in the parish there were a funeral, I mean, just in the ordinary course of events, a funeral of some elderly person, and the relatives could be prevailed upon, it might be a good thing to lay them to rest in that way. Protestant bones in a Catholic grave. She paused for thought. Just say nothing to the relatives, she said. That would be my way, because you know how people are. They wouldn't take account of how old the bones were. They'd carry on about it just the same. Just slip them in while the mourners are all gossiping. That would be how to do it. There's no need to cause unnecessary fuss and alarm and give people a chance to get on their high horses. Do I know this, Doctor? Oh, no, Father, because I was thinking I myself have this graveyard of sorts. But I am like the elder Tobias, he thought, wearied with burying. She said, "It is a hypothetical case." "Yes, of course it is. Any more?" He felt that she moved closer, that she had shuffled forward on her kneeler and put her face inches from his own. "Suppose I can save a man from drowning and I have not the courage to do it. Am I in justice bound to repair the loss to his family?" Repair the loss? Well, how could you do that? "I was considering their situation in life, how they would be left. Financially, they would be badly off. He would be the breadwinner. And suppose I could have saved him. Should I make some restitution, do you think? Am I obliged to? In justice, no. In charity, perhaps. This is the world we inhabit," he thought. Burning houses, drowning men, alien bones on the loose, all perplexity and pain to the tender conscience that cannot speak of its dearest concerns. "I think that is enough," he said, in the way of hypotheses. "If you think," she said, "if you think of a sin but you do not do it, can that be as bad as if you had actually done it?" "It can be. I would need to know more. Supposing a person entertains certain thoughts, but he does not know at the time that they are bad. Suppose they start off as quite ordinary, permissible thoughts, but then he feels where they are tending. He should stop thinking at once. But you cannot stop thinking, can you? Can you? A good Catholic can. How? Prayer. Prayer drives thought out? With practice. With practice. "I don't know," she said. "It has been my experience that you can pray, but the thoughts run under the prayers, like wires under the ground. Then you are not doing it properly." "I have tried." "Trying is not enough," he almost spoke out, giving their game away. He almost said, "Remember what you were taught in your novitiate. It is not enough to do a thing as well as you can. You must do it perfectly." "It is impossible, isn't it?" she said. "You begin innocent enough, but you can't walk around with your eyes shut, with your ears shut, with your mind a blank. Once you see and hear and think, things lead to things." "Oh yes," he said, "they do that." When his penitent had left, Father Angwin gave her time to get out of the church. Then, out of the old habit, he crossed himself, though he did not see any point in it and did not believe in the cross and did not believe he was redeemed, and silently rose and left the confessional. There, whisking around the corner into the porch, was Dempsey's pleated skirt. There, whisking around the corner into the porch, was Dempsey's pleated skirt. "Agnes," he called, his voice surprisingly, sacrilegiously loud. "What are you doing there?" Miss Dempsey froze to the spot, her fingers in the holy water stoup. He strode down the center aisle and bore down on her. "Saying my prayers, Father." Her voice was placid. Her face told a different story. "I see you are unwontedly pious for the middle of the day. What are you praying for? Have you a special intention?" Oh yes, she thought, that there should be a splendid scandal in the parish, for we need a good shake-up. "I have been praying for the suppression of heresy, the exaltation of the church, and concord amongst Christian princes," she replied. Since her Child of Mary's handbook obliged her to do this, and regularly, there was nothing Father Angwin could say. That evening it turned colder, a wind soft across the moors, out of England's autumnal heart, a wind with no breath of the sea, bearing an upland odor of privation and loss. Darkness came early, seeming to swell from the high ground above the church, and roll down the carriage drive, a carpet of night that pushed the children before it, down Church Street and into their lighted homes. In Chapel Street and Back Lane, when the last of them had left the gates, the nuns locked the school doors with iron keys and hurried in concert back to their refectory, to the tea and bread and margarine that Sister Anthony had prepared for them.